President Trump has insisted that, quote, the problem is on the left, not on the right. Vice President Vance weighed in and said, quote, we have to talk about this incredibly destructive movement of left-wing extremism that has grown up over the last few years, and I believe is part of the reason why Charlie Kirk was killed by an assassin's bullet. First, fact check. Yeah. There are multiple studies that suggest that this is not true. Based on your research, was this seen as, quote, the emergence of left-wing extremism growing up over the last few years?
Mm-hmm. So, as you said, fact check, the trend line over the last several years is that by far the biggest percentage of harm and lethality is coming from groups and movements that are far right in nature. However, we have seen growth in left-wing extremism and particularly in violence coming from the left as well over the last few years. And so they're not wrong that there's an increase. It's just still not where the biggest threat sits.
What is the risk of saying that political violence is only coming from the other side?
Yeah, I think we have seen in history, after 9/11, we had a hyper-focus in this country on Islamist forms of terrorism. We really took our eyes off of the ball when it came to white supremacist and far-right extremism, which started to grow in the data about 10 years after 9/11, with a spike in record-breaking hate groups after Obama was elected, social media coming, and we didn't pay attention to it until really 2019, 2020 is when you started to see public acknowledgement, including under the Trump administration in October 2020, the first acknowledgement from the Department of Homeland Security that, quote, the biggest and most lethal threat was coming from white supremacist and unlawful militia groups. That was October 2020. And so, I always point that out because I think it's important that the first Trump administration was the one to do it. And we by then had Pittsburgh, El Paso, Charleston, right, and then Buffalo eventually, all of these terrible attacks from young men that were targeting ethnic and racial minorities typically led finally to that belated acknowledgement.